If Max beats Lando tonight, he's champion of the world. Here are the lights. We're underway in Las Vegas and racing to turn number one with George Russell holding the lead. The battle is between Gasly and Sainz, and they open the door for Charles Leclerc to go from fourth, potentially to second. There's no grip offline. Ferrari versus Ferrari, and around the outside to take P2 goes the man fourth on the grid. Charles Leclerc roars up to second. George Russell holds the lead. Down goes Sainz, down goes Gasly. Verstappen is still ahead of Lando Norris, having left the line, but it's Russell P1.
It was very close behind as well with Norris. There's Yuki Tsunoda in there with Oscar Piastri as well. But crucial for Ferrari, they've got ahead of Gasly, and that might allow a bit of a buffer back to the main contenders behind. Verstappen stuck behind Gasly for now.
It reminds me a little bit of Montreal, the middle part of the lap, as Charles Leclerc goes for the move.
Oh, there was always going to be an opportunity for multiple overtakes there. Russell defends P1, but Gasly could not defend P4. It's game on at the front of the field. We roar through the 17th and final corner of the racetrack. Look at this scene between Mercedes and Ferrari, separated by hardly anything. There's no grip around the outside, surely. And George Russell stays ahead, but he's under massive pressure from the Scarlet Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton fighting his way past the McLaren, or at least trying to. Terrific pictures at enormous speed. The Australian driver on the left-hand side, as out front, Carlos Sainz has fought his way up to second position. Charles Leclerc has gone from contending for the lead of this Grand Prix to losing second position, and a man from the front row who lost second at the start has reclaimed it. Wow, it's a case of keeping the tyres in the window. If you fall out, you chew through them quickly. And having looked like he was going to take the lead of the Grand Prix a couple of laps ago, Charles Leclerc is now going to tumble off the podium. Through goes the championship leader, Max Verstappen, up to third. One Ferrari moves up to second, one drops down to fourth. It's Mercedes ahead of Ferrari, ahead of Red Bull. Now the podium contenders, still four in the battle for the win. Norris gets past Gasly. He has moved up to fifth position. It's Russell, then Sainz, then Verstappen. Well, we had a slightly mixed up grid because of qualifying in very low conditions. It's still only 17 degrees track temperature out there, and Hamilton's making use of these conditions. Charles Leclerc has been called in to the pits. Lewis Hamilton is gaining another place, 10th on the grid to 7th in the Grand Prix at the moment.
This is such a pleasure to ride on board with Verstappen. And when you're sitting in that cockpit, he's going to blast past Sainz. This is going to be a slam dunk move when he opens the DRS. And Sainz just has to wait in all the apexes to actually rotate the car.
Interesting comparison between the straight line speed of the Ferrari without DRS. Took a while for Verstappen to get by. Sainz will be pitting. He's got no tyres left. Lewis Hamilton has claimed fourth position.
Raw power, raw power.
Everything's looking okay for us. We hit the limiter.
It's an expiring power unit in the back of his Alpine, and after being one of the stars of the qualifying hour, the man who started third on the grid comes into the pits to retire.
Carlos Sainz sweeping past Sergio Perez up to third place. Perez yet to stop.
This is more important, though. This is a straight fight. That's Lewis Hamilton late on the brakes. That's Lewis Hamilton past Lando Norris. And that is for sixth position. We are reaching our point for the leaders to make their second stop, and Sainz being told to swap positions. That's one thing to issue the instruction, might be another thing to let both cars by. How does he do this? Through goes Leclerc. That was well driven from Carlos Sainz. What a tough position he was put in. Look, Charles Leclerc goes through. Sainz hangs on to fourth, but only surely for a few meters. Does he peel into the pits? He does, ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Synchronized swimming. He's gone deep. He's gone on, and he's cut the line as he does so. That was a strange one. On board with Lewis Hamilton, and Sainz just carries straight on.
Now he pits, and that's going to cost Sainz a lot.
What happened? We're not ready. Wake up, guys, come on.
The team have obviously said, stay out, and so he's reacted to the team. That is a major mistake for Ferrari.
And now Hamilton is well up the road, 3 seconds up the road as Sainz finally gets back onto the track.
Charles Leclerc has been called to the pits from second place, so this is now the battle for P2. Lewis Hamilton's got the speed. Look at the speed he has got, 216 miles per hour, and he moves up to third. That will become second, and it will shake out to be a Mercedes 1-2. No contest between the two greats, Verstappen and Hamilton. Now, one Ferrari with cold tyres, one Ferrari with fired up tyres, one Ferrari with a fired up driver, and Sainz will get the inside line and fourth position as he goes past Charles Leclerc. These two have been passing and repassing all day. Oh, Perez trying to go past two of them in one corner and doing so. It's been a terrible season, those are his words, but he absolutely roared by there. Two for the price of one to get past Lawson and Magnussen with one of the moves of the Grand Prix so far.
Brave on the brakes, and he probably didn't expect both places to be up for opportunity, and then manages somehow to find his way through without contact.
DRS open for the rapid Ferraris. Can Verstappen do anything about it? We know he's going to fight it, but can he fight it? Here we go on the brakes for Carlos Sainz to get by. And Verstappen could not defend when it came to the braking. One Ferrari goes through. Hulkenberg trying to go past up to 8th position to take a point away from his Japanese rival. Crucial for Haas to be best of the rest if they want to claim 6th position. Next car to lap for George Russell is Liam Lawson, then Lance Stroll. Then you get to a battle to the inside, and claiming the position is Charles Leclerc. The defence for the man who will win the title in a few laps' time is over for the Ferraris. Both Sainz and Leclerc go through. Out of the penultimate corner, he's left the entire field behind. He'll convert his pole position to victory. The British driver will look up and see the checkered flag first. He punches the air as George Russell wins the Las Vegas Grand Prix. The third time in Formula One he's taken the checkered flag. It's second place for Lewis Hamilton. Carlos Sainz will complete the podium, but further back, the Dutch driver will retain his crown. Max Verstappen is a four-time Formula One world champion. Max Verstappen is the champion of 2024, and after a mid-season spent in limitation, he was burdened until the brilliance of Brazil. He now has the title in his grasp once again. In 2024, Max Verstappen would not be moved.
That is 4 in a row, Max. 4 in a row, congratulations.
Oh my God, man, what a season. 4 times. Thank you guys, thank you to everyone. I mean, it was a little bit more difficult than last year, but we pulled through and we gave it all. Thank you so much, guys.
This is the Outlap F1 podcast featuring America's own Cody, Andy, and Deanna. Your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. Join us on the Outlap. This will be Season 6, Episode number 45 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2024 Viva Las Vegas GP review show. You've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight. And we're actually almost a full day, 24 hours removed from the early morning dawn of the Las Vegas GP. Apparently we both were watching it live. I didn't realize you were still up along with me. Otherwise, I'd have texted you a couple times. But how'd you find it? And how you hanging today?
I made it to the end. I even stayed up to watch all the post-race celebrations. The podium here in Las Vegas takes longer than the other podiums. And there were some championship awarded interviews that were going on too. So I stayed up to watch all that. So yeah, I made it all the way through, and then I, hit the bed like a rock.
I think Ted's notebook started, and I don't remember anything of that. I think he said hello, everybody, and that's all I remember because then it was out curtains for me. It was a very fun, interesting Las Vegas GP weekend. We've crowned a champion. If you didn't know, congrats to Max Verstappen on securing his 4th consecutive World Drivers' Championship. We're going to get into all of that and how he managed to do it in just a little bit. But if you have found our show, as David Croft, who was there and was broadcasting on ESPN, would say, welcome along. You can find our show, as always, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and, of course, YouTube. At Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for all of that. If you enjoy what you're seeing and you like what you're hearing, you can do as the kids do and smash that subscribe button, or you can leave us a like. Or if you're on your favorite podcasting app, if you're just listening to the audio, if you want to leave us a 5-star review, what does that all do? It just helps us come up a little bit better in F1-related search results, helps us get our content to you, if you enjoy it, that much quicker. You can email the show, as always, chatnow@outlapf1.com, or you can send us a DM on all or any of the social media platforms that we're on. Thank you so much to the people who do continue to support the show, including Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and, of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to help out the show in any way you'd like, with a couple bucks, $1, $5, we would be most grateful. You can see our link in our show notes. It's our anchor page. All goes into trying to upgrade equipment, keep equipment that we have relevant, enable us to do all sorts of fun stuff. So we would be most grateful if you'd like to do that. Lastly, before we hop into the bit of breaking news that happened over the weekend, which was pretty massive when you think about it, but the good folks at Manscaped, since Christmas is just around the corner, it's going to be Thanksgiving in the U.S. Later on this week as we gear up for Qatar, but that means Christmas is right around the corner. So if you're looking to secure a deal, you can use our code OUTLAP, OUTLAP, all one word, and that will get you 20% off and free shipping on your order from those folks at Manscaped. All right, so we're just going to hop right into the breaking news. We talked about this a little bit in our preview, but I don't think we quite had the timing quite right. Apparently this is going to happen now, as in right now. The Andretti bid is now set to be approved with a significant name change to the entry. It is, I had this confirmed by someone actually in the paddock, Chris Medland, who was gracious enough to answer my direct question about this because I wanted to make sure I got it right. This is the Andretti bid with the Andretti staff and the Andretti facilities. However, it will not be branded with the Andretti Global logo or name on the entry. It is expected to be called Cadillac F1, will be powered by Ferrari engines until 2028. So this is tentatively going to be approved, hasn't officially been approved, but it's going to be approved for 2026 entry. They'll use Ferrari power units until 2028, and at that point they will switch over to their own independent GM branded and manufactured power units. We're going to get our 11th team on the grid after all. You take the guys that were like oil and water out of the equation, you throw in a little bit of a Department of Justice investigation in the paddock, and suddenly everybody's friends with one another. Wow, look at that. Cody, what's your reaction to this? Did not have this one on my bingo card going into the weekend for sure.
No, I definitely didn't either. It's a great thing. Yeah, I think it's what most fans wanted to see happen. It does suck that it's not going to see, in all likelihood, the Andretti branding because they are the ones who made this happen. And it does also suck that, as you said, we needed to get certain people out of the equation, it seems, to actually get the deal done and in paper. But it is going to be very exciting. It is very exciting that GM is going to have their own engine in this in a few years. It's awesome that the team is going to be, it looks like they're going to be in the championship right from the start of the new regulations. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. More cars on the grid to me is more exciting. We're going to have more American representation on the grid beyond Haas. Again, it does kind of seem a little weird to me that it's not going to have apparently any Andretti branding. Fun doesn't seem to have any issues with Haas branding for their team. But I digress. No matter what, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they got there. And I guess I don't have to really care how they got there, but the fact is they got there. There's a little part there where we get to awards. I'll talk about some of the pettiness and how that kind of devolved into where we got to. But I don't particularly like that aspect of it. But I like the fact that finally rationality finally has supposedly invaded the paddock, invaded the team's mindset, that they realize that, hey, if there's a big mark that wants to come in, you might want to let them in because, one, it's more cars on the grid, which is always helpful. And two, we've had some major defections in terms of OEMs and power units, especially with these new regs coming in. So this gets one back into the win column. And I think that ultimately is probably what convinces the teams and convinces Liberty. And I mean, the FIA had already stamped approval, but it, convinces all of those stakeholders to say, wait a minute, what are we doing? Why are we keeping these guys out when the even current marks that are in the sport are folding and going away? So I'm happy we got there. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to say, I guess I'm happy we get there. And as we learn more detail, obviously at this point, we have not heard about who the potential drivers would be or how the team, or who's going to run the team or any of that stuff. So as that continues to come and when this gets made official, obviously stay tuned to our social media. We will try to bring all of that to you as we learn it. Okay. So turning into the Las Vegas GP weekend, for the on-track stuff, we shall start with our headlines of the day. Cody, what you got here?
It's Mercedes with a steel chair. They come out of nowhere, and they've done this several times this year, where they go weeks and weeks and weeks, are the fourth fastest car, Lewis Hamilton going out in Q1, all that craziness. And then every once in a while, you get a little glimpse of what could be. Mercedes was dominant this weekend, both in qualifying from George Russell and during the race. And it was all apparent from practice. And me and you were sitting there looking at our predictions going, oh, no. So great job to Mercedes this weekend. It was definitely an unexpected dominant performance. You can definitely tell where the team's frustration comes from with their car, because we get glimpses of it, as I said, like this weekend, where we know that car can be great and the fastest on its day. But the conditions that it takes to get the car there are so narrow that I would be surprised if we saw this happen in the last two races.
Yeah, fully agree. My headline is kind of around the same way yours is, and that's Mercedes took a spin at the slot machines in Las Vegas, and whatever setup they brought came up 777s across the way. And the machine was dinging and spitting out coin or money or speed or downforce or tire temp or whatever it was needed. They got it. They had it, and they had it in spades this weekend. So congrats to them. Lewis Hamilton, even messing up in qualifying, didn't manage to hinder him. He slices through the field like the Lewis of old and makes everybody else around him look pretty darn slow, including Max Verstappen, who, with some help, with a Dremel tool, which we're going to talk about, that was a new one, did secure his spot amongst the greats in the sport over the course of this weekend. So full congrats to Max again for securing the Drivers' Championship. But yeah, just we're going to get into all of this. Definitely crazy mixed up grid. Not the craziest mixed up race that we got kind of last year, but it was still pretty darn good. We saw some good overtakes according to all that. And we're going to hop into that. We will start, as we are always apt to do, with the qualifying recap. So going out in Q1 in P20, the first he had himself an interesting FP2, FP3. He was lucky to get out even to turn a lap. You didn't think he was even going to make it. That was Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin. P19 was Valtteri Bottas. P18 was Alex Albon. P17 was Fernando Alonso. P16, ouch, war pain yet again, Sergio Perez in the Red Bull out in Q1. That's the Q1 monster grabbing one of the heavy hitters here. P15 was Liam Lawson. P14, Franco Colapinto, despite a crash, which we'll talk about. P13 was Zhao Guanyu. P12 was Kevin Magnussen. P11, Esteban Ocon. The top 10 from 10 to 1. P10, looking like he was on for pole, made a mistake in the first turn. That ruined his lap. That was Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. P9, Nico Hulkenberg, Haas Ferrari, kicking back a bit against their rival in the battle for P6 in the Constructors. P8, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. We'll have to talk about where their pace went between FP3 and qualifying. P7, Yuki Tsunoda in the V-Carb. So V-Carb showing some surprising pace here. P6 was Lando Norris. That was all he could muster in terms of getting near the front this weekend. P5 was Max Verstappen. So championship drivers, Max, first blood on the weekend to him. P4 was Charles Leclerc. P3, the shocker of qualifying for me. Maybe it's not so shocking anymore. Maybe we should start to really pay attention to what these guys are doing. But Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, since the COTA upgrades have hit, Alpine in one lap pace has been pretty darn good. Manages to get into the third spot. P2, Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. That was expected. I think we all thought Ferrari was going to be pretty dominant here. At least in qualifying, it certainly looked that way. But P1, again, did not see this one coming. George Russell in the Mercedes by almost a full 10th on pole position with a 132.312. All right. Cody, big takeaways from the qualifying session.
Lots of good ones here. First one, the obvious one, Mercedes pace from practice turned into the real deal in qualifying. I thought we were going to see potentially a 1-2 from Mercedes in qualifying and locking out the front row. Russell did his part. Unfortunately, as you said, Lewis did make that mistake, and so he ended up at the back of Q3. Ended up needing to cut his way through the field in the race. It does kind of make you wonder what could have been had he not made that mistake and did lock out the front row. I think we could have seen a really, really good battle between the two of them, as we're going to get into. We almost maybe could have seen a battle between the two of them, despite. I did cringe really hard when Franco Colapinto had that accident because, man, Williams cannot catch a break. They had so much rebuilding and are up against the budget cap with how many times they've had to rebuild their cars. They managed to get everything in order during the 3-week break for this race, and then the car was destroyed. And in qualifying, they had a great camera shot of one of the team members for Williams in slow-mo where he's just kind of doing this and being like, oh, God. And I felt his pain in that moment. They somehow managed to get it ready again for the race, but I don't know how many more times they can do that. It's a good thing for them that there's only 2 races left because they gotta fill up the bank again.
Yeah, I mean the Williams mechanics. I think if there is an award that is given to a mechanic, you have to give it to these guys. They have rebuilt that car between Logan Sargent and Franco Colapinto now so many times. One, I think they're really good at it. They must obviously know how to do the whole salvage bit, but for a team that you were just wanted to say, just get through this weekend. Don't hit the car. I don't care if you don't score any points, but we got to get to the end of this thing. It's the one team that you didn't want to see any bad stuff happen to. And there it was. And it was just a small overcorrection. And the Vegas circuit is such that if you make a small overcorrection in the wrong spot, there's the wall. And that's what did it for him. And, you heard the first bang, and then you watch the car go all the way across the track. And then the second bang, which is just, if not worse than the first one. Your heart just goes out to all of those mechanics who had worked so hard and so tirelessly. And then there's the shot of James Vowles, who just does this long blink, on purpose, closing and reopening of his eyes. Like, if he could be anywhere else in the universe, I think he would have preferred to have been somewhere else in that moment. But, And I don't know that this is anything. It was clear to me that making the Sargent move when they did was the right thing to do because that had kind of gotten out of hand. But and Franco, I think, is going to show more raw talent, and they're still trying to figure out ways to get him either into the sport or back into the sport after, if next year doesn't work out for him. But damn, you really have one job, keep the car together, and you can't do that. And that's just not a good look all the way around. Yikes.
Nah, he's got plenty of talent. We've seen it over some of the successes he's had since filling in for Logan Sargent. And I think he's going to have a successful career. He's going to get into a car somewhere. But yeah, it's some rookie mistakes, and a lot of drivers had mistakes this weekend. They were complaining that due to the cold weather and the amount that the tires needed to be inflated to combat those cold temperatures, some of the drivers were describing it as feeling like you were driving in the wet. So understandable for the mistake to be made. But as you said, it was the one team we didn't want to see have that problem. Other big surprise from this, Pierre Gasly must have had like a big hearty breakfast or something that morning, because he was on it and ready. I was not prepared for him to jump to the top of the timing sheet right there at the end. I was like sitting there going, holy crap, they're going to do it again. Or at least Gasly was. Unfortunately, Ocon did not have the qualifying to match this time out, but it was still very exciting to see, especially now that they're running the all pink car here. Good to see that up front. I think it's a little bit more fun than the blue pink kind of candy looking thing that they had going before. So
yeah, and the big part about Gasly's final lap, and you don't usually see this, and it's just a testament to how far the track had to go from where it started to where it finished. The track was still ramping up. So you wanted to be the last or the second to last or near the end of that Q3 session. And I don't know if he got a toe or what it was, but Pierre Gasly in the straight line going down the strip, I think he put together 4 or 5 consecutive purple sectors at the end of Q3 in the third sector, purple mini sectors. So whatever it was, he closed the show, and that thing was at full blast, nothing hanging out, managed to get it stopped and kept it on track. So, yeah, fair play, man. That was, I don't know if he just had, I don't know what went to a buffet in Vegas and gave him super vitamin shots or what, but whatever it was, man, he certainly brought the goods. Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about George Russell already. The Mercedes dominance. It could have easily been a Mercedes 1-2. They were clearly the quickest throughout all of the practices. They were clearly the quickest once we got to qualifying, and you just had to sit back and go, I don't think anybody's going to touch these guys, and nobody really did. In terms of the Lando Max thing, again, this was kind of first blood to Max. Max and Red Bull kind of had some struggles early in the practice sessions, but definitely started to rally when it came for game time. And one of those things, and the story, whether or not it's a rumor or I don't think there's truth to it, but the story that had burbled up was that somehow Red Bull had brought the wrong rear wing. And I don't think that was the case at all. I think they brought a model of rear wing that they took a look at and saw what everybody else did and went, maybe we hadn't gone low downforce enough. And it got so actually extreme that I think it was between FP2 and FP3, they literally took a Dremel tool and shaved part of the rear wing off to lower the downforce just a little bit more. And whether that ended up helping or whatever, one, you always got to remember the Max factor of all this. Maybe the car's not its best, but he's worth a good chunk just on his own. And I think that's kind of what you saw here, because his teammate is down in 16th, and top-level trolling by the Las Vegas Sphere after Q1 to literally see a big picture of Sergio Perez giving himself the thumbs down is top-level stuff, man. I don't know if you caught it, but during the break between Q1 and Q2, they had all 20 drivers do a celebration, and then they do the same thing in Formula E, where they've got the celebration, they've got the oh man celebration. This was Sergio Perez, and he literally, his take on it was to give him a thumbs down. And so you see, big thing, the scoreboard says who's eliminated, and it says P16 Perez, and he's giving himself the thumbs down.
Oh, no.
I couldn't have written it any better, but more and more pain, it seems, for Sergio Perez in the other Red Bull.
Yeah, talk about a kick in the teeth there. As far as the Red Bull car goes, yes, it wasn't that they literally brought the wrong wing. They didn't have a wing that was low enough downforce. Apparently, they haven't developed one. They didn't see a need to develop such a low downforce rear wing because the amount of times that they would need it during the season are relatively few and far between, like maybe Monza and here. And we actually saw a similar thing with this kind of weirdly shaped rear wing at least one other track. It might have been Monza. But yeah, it looks a little goofy with how they just literally cut slots in the rear wing to make it happen. But it got Max up to 5th place, and that's all that they really needed. If they're saving a few bucks within the budget cap by just taking the scissors to the rear wing every now and again when they need to, it gets it done.
Yeah, and you're not going to any of the rear wings I think you saw here are not going to be used in the last 2 races. So you kind of didn't need to save it for saving its sake. So yeah, take the Dremel tool and chop it off. And I guess that works for you. And if it still meets all the regs, it's good to go in my book as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, good ingenuity by, I think, the Red Bull team to help Max do some rallying there after looking a little suspect in the qualifying. All right, so we had our grid set up. The only post-qualifying penalty was, ironically enough, Valtteri Bottas took, I think, a 10-place grid penalty, and then Lance Stroll actually did get promoted up a little bit, and then Franco Colapinto was started from the pit lane, so he surrenders his P14 spot after the wreck in Q2. He was declared fit to race. I think the Williams statement that put out that said he had a 50 G impact, so mandatory medical yeah, I mean, it was just icky all the way around. You weren't sure if he was okay, but fortunately he was all checked out, all declared fit and good to race, and he would do so. All right, so we will turn the page over and we will get into the race, and we shall start, as we are always apt to do, with the back markers and your non-classified finishers. Unfortunately, the great qualifying did not translate into a good race finish for these guys. Pierre Gasly in the Alpine is the first non-finisher of the race, going out with a suspected engine failure. Did manage to bring it back to the pits, but you saw the blue smoke, and that's never a good sign. Your other non-classified finisher was Alex Albon in the Williams, suffering also a mechanical failure as well. Forced to retire the car after 25 laps. P18, Valtteri Bottas in the Kick Sauber. P17, Esteban Ocon in the other Alpine, so no help for Alpine in their quest for 6th in the Constructors. P16 was Liam Lawson. P15 was Lance Stroll, so a bit of a rally there. P14, coming from the back of that pit lane start to a respectable finish here, that was Franco Colapinto in the Williams. And P13, look at that, Zhou Guanyu in the Kick Sauber. Almost out of our back markers, Cody. Look at that.
Yeah, it was a pretty amazing performance from Zhou Guanyu. He was actually running in the points during some parts of the race, and I thought, oh my God, it would be so good to see him just get 1 point for the team this year, since we know that he's not going to be, coming back next year. It would be a good way to bow out. It didn't come to that, but he still did have a very respectable performance, I would say. My heart goes out to Pierre Gasly. That fantastic qualifying performance, I think he could have netted some points for the team, and they're fighting for that position in the Constructors right now, so everything counts. But yeah, he was very upset over the radio when he felt the power going on in the car. We did see the blue smoke, and then when he gets to his box in the pit lane, there was a camera shot that showed pretty much a little hole blown in the back side pod area of the car. So something pretty catastrophically went wrong there. It is really too bad that they weren't able to capitalize on that qualifying performance.
Yeah, suddenly, because of their amazing result in Brazil a few weeks ago, they are now very, very relevant in all of this championship talk. And, now what they do matters a lot more than it probably used to for them. So this is not good for them because as we'll look at the points, and this did affect all of that battle for P6. So, yeah, it's just one of those things. He was looking early on. I thought he was keeping up with the pace of the runners in front. A bit of a DRS trained forms, but he was a member of it. So I think as long as he was kind of sticking into that, he was able to kind of hold his own. Probably, I think the best he would have been able to do might have been P8, P7, if I'm looking at it realistically from relative pace. But that could have been enough, as it turns out. But yeah, just an unfortunate thing. And Esteban Ocon not really anywhere to really think of in terms of either qualifying or race pace this weekend. So they kind of had to pin their hopes on Gasly, and unfortunately, the engine said no more. All right. So I guess any other thoughts in the back markers that you wanted to cover?
Let's see here. Yeah, too bad that Alex Albon continued Williams' string of bad luck with having to retire the car halfway through the Grand Prix. I would say pretty weak performance from Liam Lawson this race, especially considering Yuki Tsunoda was able to score points. So he is not confirmed to be in that seat for next season. So if he wants to be confirmed, he needs to do something a little better than what he did here. Stack up a little better against Yuki Tsunoda. I think this is probably his first time racing at this track, though. So, maybe he gets the benefit of the doubt for being, novice here. But definitely want to see a little bit better coming from him.
Yeah, I mean, there is an iconic pass of, I think it's Magnussen, Lawson, and Perez going three wide down the strip, and Perez actually getting the best of all three of them at one point. So at least Sergio Perez, and we'll talk about where he finished, but he rallied a little bit from his qualifying start. So that was good to see that at least the moves are still there at some point. And that's probably significant because every time Lawson and Perez get together, it's going to be looked at. It's going to be put under the microscope, and who comes out of what battle better. But yeah, I think this one, it looked like Lawson and a lot of drivers were struggling. I mean, you're gonna look at where everybody finished, and I think you're gonna see some differences simply because of the conditions and the grip level and the dust. And not only the dust, but the wind apparently had kicked up a lot on race day. So all of those factors, and we've said many times, these cars are on a knife edge as it is. It all affected everybody. So it could be one gust that puts you out, or you spin around a corner or something like that. But yeah, so yeah, not the best weekend for Liam Lawson. He does finish on the lead lap, but no points for him. The Aston Martins continue to struggle. It was an odd call, I would say. Well, when we get to Fernando Alonso, we'll talk about kind of the odd call, that what they made strategy-wise. Didn't quite understand it. Would have taken a lot of circumstances to have it work, and none of that happened. So I guess we'll move into the midfield now, and we will start with P12, and that's Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. P11, the aforementioned Fernando Alonso. That's where he finishes, but no points for Aston on the weekend. P10 does make up, at least for the Q1 exit, a little bit to get a point. That would be Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. P9, Yuki Tsunoda in the other V-Carb, scoring a couple points for them, so that is very significant. They are all in that big fight for P6 in the Constructors. P8, Nico Hülkenberg. Haas retake that sixth position in the Constructors due to that effort there. P7 and P6, you find the two McLarens. That was Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, respectively. That's pretty much where they qualified. That's pretty much where they finished. That was pretty much the top end. Not a good track. Did not suit the car for them. We'll talk about that. But because Lando finished behind the fifth place finisher of Max Verstappen, that enables Max to secure the fourth Drivers' World Championship. It's a 63-point gap. There are not more than 63 points available at this stage. So no matter what Lando does, Max is champion. And P4, the not so happy Charles Leclerc. We will have to talk about some post race radio. It's Ferrari, not exactly a happy home right now. Let's put it that way. Some things to sort out, I think, for sure. All right, Cody, where do you want to go in the midfield here?
First item of business for me is Max Verstappen, 4-time consecutive world champion. Stacks him up against many of the greats. Sebastian Vettel from Red Bull, 4-time consecutive champion. Lewis Hamilton had a run of 4 consecutive championships, and then Michael Schumacher is the only person who's ever made it to 5. So he is definitely stacking up for a franchise of success, as they described it during his post race interview. But yeah, very excited to see him do this. He is my favorite driver on the grid right now, and I think we'll get to this probably for our season predictions next year. I think he does have a good shot of being the second 5-time consecutive champion. We'll have to see where the car is next year, but for now he can soak in the success. It was hard fought this year, much harder than he had to fight last year, and I think that it just goes to show that he's got what it takes even under pressure. And we did see him buckling a little bit here and there during some of his more questionable maneuvers or outright scary maneuvers against Lando Norris, like we saw in Mexico City. But he's managed to do it, and nobody can take it away from him now. He is clear of Lando Norris. He didn't perform particularly well in this race. He was trying to fight for a podium for a little while there, but the Ferraris were catching him so quickly, I didn't think it was going to happen. He pretty much let Hamilton go by, which I think caused everyone to breathe a big sigh of relief when that happened, because it could have, it's been messy between the two of them in the past. And he did try to hold up the Ferraris for a little while, but probably saw the writing on the wall and that he didn't need to actually keep them behind to secure the championship. It did end up being, I would say, a pretty disappointing weekend for McLaren. They're still well in the lead for the constructors, but they did lose, I think, 12 points on their lead against Ferrari. So they're only, we'll get into it in the point, but I think only 24 clear. That is definitely something that can be covered in 2 races. So here's to hoping that they're able to bounce back in Qatar and Abu Dhabi and secure this constructors championship, because we know that Ferrari wants it just as bad. And I think they've, got just as good a chance at this point. They've been performing very well lately. They did get a driver on the podium this time out. It was not Charles Leclerc, though. And I think Charles made it very clear that he was not happy about that. He let fly a whole lot of F-bombs on the radio there at the end. So if they're going to find anybody again, they're going to find him for that. I think they bleeped out all of it. I don't even think they showed it on the regular broadcast, because probably would have bleeped out so much of it you wouldn't know what was going on. But yeah, not happy. It seems that there was some kind of discussion between him, Carlos Sainz, and the team as to what they were going to do in this race for, who's going to finish where, under what conditions. Maybe they had some kind of agreement that they weren't going to duke it out on track, that, unless somebody was losing the tires, which did happen. Charles Leclerc lost his tires pretty quick. He was trying to bring the battle to George Russell in the beginning. His tires fell off very quickly. I believe Carlos Sainz ended up going by him at that point. But I think the anger comes from later in the race, where Carlos Sainz didn't want to let Charles Leclerc back by. And went so far as to tell the team that maybe they should ask Carlos in Spanish, which I thought was a pretty nasty dig. But yeah, he seems to be out of patience, not feeling like Carlos Sainz is the team player that he should be. Carlos has nothing to lose at this point. He's out of the team at the end of this year, and he's probably just gunning for everything he can get at this point, because every podium that he gets now, let's be real, he's not going to get a podium unless there's a miracle. Yeah, he's not going to get any podiums driving for Williams unless there's a miracle. So he's got to bask in having the good car while he can, and I think that means he's got no incentive to play nice. For him, doesn't matter whether he's in front of Charles or Charles is in front of him. It's going to be, if they're finishing consecutively, it's going to be the same number of points for the team. So why not fight for it?
Yeah. So a lot to unpack, I think, for me in the midfield. I mean, I'll start with the two McLarens. And honestly, from my perspective, from being the huge fan of them that I am, I'm just happy that this race is over, because last year I know was really bad. And I knew it was not a good omen when Oscar on his initial outlap just goes, "Oi, the grip is really bad." And that does not suit the McLaren car at all. And as well as they tried to dial it in, it looked like they kind of peaked first of all of the big heavy hitters, and they couldn't really get beyond the 133 range in either free practice 3 or in qualifying. So they were able to hang for a while, but once the track ramped up and everybody kind of really hung it out and went, pushed that little extra bit more, they just didn't have a response in qualifying pace. And apparently in race pace, it wasn't until really very late in the race, after I think Lando was down to max, I think to the tune of like 12, 11 seconds, that they started just throwing all sorts of weird setup, whatever setup you could change in terms of diff settings, they started throwing it at the car. And they found something very, very late, because all of a sudden Lando starts setting green sectors. And I'm like, where was all of this? And the tires are old, and it doesn't seem to make any sense to me. So they found something. They found it too late. So, but at that point, it was pretty much already over. The game was over. There wasn't anything really to do. From my perspective, this was definitely damage limitation, because if it wasn't for I think the heroics of Mercedes, this constructors thing could be a lot more spicy than it even is. So I'll say -12. Like, I even came into race day after qualifying and I said, if they can limit it to 10, I think that's really good. They lost 12. So I'm okay. You got out of here. You finished the race with both cars. You didn't do that last year. And you got through a track that just apparently does not jive with your car. So I'll take it. Lando didn't have anything really from Max other than maybe the first turn. He tried to send the move on, I think, the inside, because he was starting on the inside, and Max kind of shut the door, and that was kind of the end of it. But it wasn't really no bad behavior by Max or anything like that. It was clean all the way. So no issues there. In terms of Max, I thought he had himself, I think, probably the best race he could have, given where the car was. Again, he didn't have the great downforce or the ability to switch on the tires as well as the Ferraris, or for certainly the Mercedes. And when Max doesn't think he's got a shot at a win, he'll let Hamilton go in a situation like that. He's done that before. He's even done that with Lando in Singapore. There really wasn't any shot. He kind of realized it, and he just took the best shot he could, and that's where he needed to be. Did fight a little bit with the Ferraris. There is a Constructors' Championship implication there. He did ask the team, what should I do? And they told him, well, you can fight a little bit, but he wasn't going to put the car in any sort of harm's way or anything like that. I would have been shocked if he starts fighting Leclerc like tooth and nail for fourth place. There was no reason for him to do that. He did make the Ferraris have to make a move on him, which they both did, and eventually both got past. But, the spicy part is, I think, in the Ferrari camp, because I've got a snippet of the post-race radio from one Charles Leclerc, and it reads as follows. And his engineer comes on and says, "Charles, you did your job." And his response was, "Yeah, I did my job, but being nice fucks me over all the fucking time. It's not even being nice. It's just being respectful. I know I need to shut up, but at one point, it's always the same." So, and then I think the engineer comes on and basically tells him to stop talking.
Yeah. No more, please. No more.
Yes. No more comms, please. So, yeah, a little bit of high drama in Mercedes camp. And I think if you're Leclerc, you're going to have to expect to get more of it next year, because Lewis is a mate guy. He's not going to come in and try to acquiesce in any sort of the way. He's in it to try to win the championship. This is kind of his last shot at doing so. So if you don't sort this stuff out now, now I look at Fred Vasseur and say, okay, you got to sort this stuff out. You got to sort it out quick, because if this becomes a thing going in the last 2 races, they legitimately do have a shot at the Constructors' Championship. So let's see kind of where that ends up going. But I didn't see, other than the weird pit stop thing with Sainz, and we'll talk about that, anything really. I didn't see the team drama order, but I didn't know all the communication necessarily beforehand. All right, so we will move into that podium, and the aforementioned podium saw Carlos Sainz come home in P3 for Ferrari, and P2 and P1 rallying from P10 on the grid to finish P2. Lewis Hamilton only 7 seconds adrift at the end, and I think we finally saw where the limit of the tires really were with Lewis, because he got to at one point within 4 seconds, and then it just kind of died out for him. But a very lonely race at the front, I would say, for one George Russell. He converts the pole position all the way to the race win. A dominant drive for him if there ever was one. This one counted. There were no post-race malfeasance or investigations or weirdness or anything. So George Russell now officially gets his 3rd win in his career. Congrats to him on opening and closing the show.
Yeah, very, very good drive from George Russell. He seemed in control throughout the entire weekend. Very strong during practice. Obviously took the pole position, led off the line, and had to fight Charles Leclerc off a little bit there. But once the tires fell off for Charles, he pretty much took off down the road and built up a really good gap, and was able to, when you get that far in front, all you have to do is control the pace. Keep the tires good. I think the commentators were going maybe a little overboard for drama getting late in the race, because Lewis Hamilton did a fantastic job of recovering from his 10th place start, slicing through the field, getting up to P2, and he was catching George for a lot of that last stint, and the commentators were kind of drumming it up like we might see like a fight for the win on our hands here yet. I didn't really think for a minute that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. I figured that they were just trying to make it dramatic, and in actuality, George was probably just managing his pace, whereas Lewis was driving the tires off that car, trying to catch up. And there did come a point there in the last few laps where the gap got down to about 4 seconds, and George's engineer came over the radio and said, okay, it's time to pick up the pace. And that was pretty much where the gap stopped closing. I think George even opened it back up a little bit. So I figured that George was just holding back, saving his tires for when he needed them, and was pretty much going to be in control of that, no matter what. Even if Lewis did manage to get even closer into DRS range, his tires would have been like completely shot at that point, and it would have been, I think, fairly easy for George to pull off a defensive maneuver, or talk the team into being like, hey, I don't think he's got it. Don't let him pass me. Just hold position or something. And it didn't even come to that. So
right.
A great performance from both of them. Again, from what I said before, earlier on in the show, it does make you wonder what could have been for the on-track spectacle if they had locked out the front row, because I think George and Lewis could have really made it like a great fight for the win. But it was not to be this time out. But they still get to have the happy success of the 1-2 finish, something that they've really needed this year. Their times at being the strongest car have been few and far between, but when they are the strongest car, they are really, really strong this year. So hopefully they can figure out something to make that car more consistent for next year, and then we'll see maybe like a real 4-way fight here, which would be the coolest thing.
Yeah, apparently it's cold, windy, wet, and or dusty conditions. Mercedes are there to play. Hello, how you doing? And it's such a narrow window, and I don't know that I've seen it that much of a disparity between when they're good versus when they're not, because we've seen them be on the back of the Big Four, and obviously now we've seen them be in the front of the Big Four. I mean, Canada, they were really good. In Great Britain, where it was cool and wet and tricky conditions, they were really freaking good there too. And, here they are again. And, Spa, okay, wasn't, wet or anything, but that was a cooler race than what you would have normally expected for that time on the calendar. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a very narrow working window. They honestly kept saying, we don't know why necessarily we're good here, but we'll take it and we'll run with it. And from the first turn of the wheel in practice to the end of the race, especially the Russell side of it, and Hamilton was right there in terms of all the practices and all the way up through, and except for the one mistake in the last lap in Q3, they were both right there. So whatever the magical formula is, if Toto Wolff could bottle it and ship it to Qatar, he would love to do so. I think it's going to be more like a genie in a bottle. You rub it, it's not going to work. But, you turn the heat up or the tire temperature up. And I have my own theory about this racetrack because of the weird conditions. And I think it suits cars in general that I have what I would consider stupid downforce. All these cars generate a ton of downforce, but how efficient is that downforce? And on a track that is cold, dusty, not a lot of grip, getting the tires into the operating range is so key and so important that if you have excess downforce that in any other place might hinder you because you're washing the car away and you're putting it so hard down that you're, going through your tires a lot quicker, which is apparently is what happens to Mercedes. Well, here, because of these conditions, now they're in their window. It's just like when it goes from wet to dry. All of these cars at some point find their sweet spot in that. Either when it's really wet or when it's slightly drying or when it's about to go from inters to slicks. Somebody always seems to find their pace, and you see that disparity amongst the different teams. So it was fascinating kind of from an engineering perspective, I would say, to watch. Just kind of to see kind of how that worked. But that's my own term. I'm not trying to say that they engineered a bad car. They didn't. They engineered, obviously, a really darn good car, especially here, because they were great this weekend.
One last little bit before we move on. Carlos Sainz did have a very strong race, despite, any internal arguments between him and Charles Leclerc on how things went. And you could make the argument that it really shouldn't have even been as close to battle at some points as it should have been. The team did Carlos a little bit of a disservice at one point in the race where Carlos said, hey, I think it's time to pit. Tires are going away. Really want to do this. And he apparently thought the team was on board with that. He's following Lewis Hamilton, I believe it was, into the pits. And all of a sudden, he shoots back out of the pits at the last minute, crossing over the white lines that lead you into the pits. And they broadcast the radio a little later that said, Carlos is asking what happened. And the team said, we weren't ready for you. So, for Ferrari, dropping the ball a bit there, I can't imagine how long they're sitting right there. Like, how long can it take you to get the tires ready and get out there? But you're supposed to be ready at the drop of a hat, and they weren't. But it did kind of bring into the question the legality of his move there, because he was looking like he was committed to coming into the pits. He was slowed down. He was in, the lines guiding into the pit lane, and then he shot back out. And when I saw him do that, I thought, oh no, that's going to be a penalty or something. And it wasn't even noted. So apparently I misunderstood the rules there. I know there was some discussion I was seeing on social media about comparison to when Lewis Hamilton got a penalty a bunch of years ago for cutting into the pit lane at the last minute after he had gotten damage to his car. I think it was Germany 2019, right before or right after kind of like the pit lane. And
that's one of the more famous radio messages. That's where the engineer is going in and out.
But in that case, he drove into the pit lane after a bollard that is supposed to be like the your last chance to get in, and so that was the penalty in that case. I guess Carlos Sainz didn't cut out after that bollard. So I guess maybe it's legal. It didn't really look legal, especially since he was already way slowed down, but got away with it at the very least.
Yeah, and the adjudication of it actually only turned out to be a deleted lap time. That was actually the official race director's determination, was he went outside the track limits and therefore loses the lap time. And since he had not gotten 3 strikes, he did not get either a black and white flag or any sort of a time penalty for that. This was Rui Marquez's first race. We have to mention that as the race director. And it was kind of an interesting call. But as you say, Cody, there was really no, like, the NASCAR term would be a commit cone, where, like, if you are to the right of the cone or to the left of the cone, depending on where the pit lane is, you are committed, to going in once you pass that. One of the things that actually did get brought up in the course of the weekend was how light the lines, because, again, this is Las Vegas Strip, it's a street track, how light the lines, the painted lines for the pit lane really were, because they were trying to make it so that, it could go back to regular traffic and you just pour some paint thinner or something on it, to erase the line, and you go back to, your normal service resumed every night. So it was basically not as thick even of a line as you would normally expect to see. And I know there were several drivers that did question what they were going to do about it. And I'm not exactly sure entirely what they did. I think they made it a little bit brighter, but that was really about it. So in those two situations, I guess that's how he if he got away with anything, that's how he got away with it. I was surprised not to see an investigation. I was surprised not to see a noted or anything, but there was definitely a quicker adjudication of stuff that did happen. And it wasn't like the race director wasn't sticking to the letter of the law and the rules, because, ask Oscar Piastri, lined up apparently not quite right in the grid and got himself a 5-second penalty for that, which he served during the pit stop. So, and it ultimately probably didn't affect where he finished. I think he probably finishes P7 regardless. But it was just kind of an interesting take. Not necessarily something I don't know that I agree or disagree, but I guess if that's how you set it up, then that's how you set it up. Great. All right. So that concludes the Viva Las Vegas portion of the weekend. Our race is now in the books. We are going to take a break. We are going to re-rack. We will come back and we will tell you what this did to the driver's standings as they are after this round. And we'll look at the constructors, which is definitely where the spice of these last 2 rounds are going to be. So you won't want to miss it. Then we'll open it up to your reactions on what you saw this weekend, the fan email segment. We've got our normal contributors on tap, and we're ready to react to them. We'll hand out some awards. We will breeze through the prediction results because there's not a whole lot of points that either of us got. Because our podium got all screwed up with the Mercedes dominance. But and then we'll preview a little bit of Qatar. So come on back and we'll get into all of it.
You are listening to the Outlap F1 podcast, and we'll be right back after this quick pit stop. Grab your flu powder, broomstick, or apparate to your favorite audio streaming service to join the discussion on Hogwarts, a podcast, where Dan and his friends have in-depth chapter-by-chapter breakdowns of each Harry Potter novel. Join the group as they dive into the magical world and discuss plot points, analyze character development, and occasionally go off the rails. Whether you're a muggle who's new to the series or a pure-blood wizard who won't need a remember-all, Hogwarts, a podcast, brings everyone to the Great Hall for a magical discussion. Hogwarts, a podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, welcome back in. This is season 6, episode number 45 of the Outlap F1 podcast. And if you wanted to know where we were going, this is where we were.
Bright light city, gonna set my soul on fire.
It's the 2024 Las Vegas GP review show. You've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight, and we just wrapped up talking about, amazingly, even though there was on-track drama, there wasn't as much off-track stuff. We had no manhole covers things. All the practices went to time. The massive feat of engineering went all right. No huge dramas that way. This is a very good thing. They pulled it off. They pulled it off a lot better, much easier production this year. It's the 2024 Las Vegas GP, and we just wrapped up our discussion of the race itself. And now we're going to take a look at where the points are after this round. We have crowned the driver's champion, and that is Max Verstappen. So, Cody, why don't you break down where everybody sits right now in the drivers, and I will break down the fascinating and still up for grabs in a lot of places constructor standings.
All right. So Max Verstappen is in first place, and it is official. He is not going anywhere this season. Max Verstappen is crowned driver's champion of the world. He is in first and going nowhere with Red Bull, and he currently stands at 403 points. In second place, Lando Norris, unfortunately not taking the driver's championship battle any further, but still in a very respectable P2 in the championship for McLaren. He sits at 340 points. Charles Leclerc gets a decent haul of points from finishing fourth this weekend. He's in third in the points for Ferrari and is at 319 points. Oscar Piastri, not the greatest performance from him this weekend. He didn't do himself any favors with that penalty that he earned right at the start of the race for his grid slot position. But he is still in fourth place in the points for McLaren at 268 points. Only a little bit ahead of Carlos Sainz at this point. Carlos Sainz managed to get a podium this race. He's in fifth place in the points for Ferrari at 259 points. So only 9 points behind Piastri at this point. There is still positions to play for in the drivers' standings. George Russell, biggest haul of points this weekend from his outstanding performance for Mercedes. He's in sixth place at 217 points. And that opens up the gap to his teammate Lewis Hamilton just a tiny bit. Lewis is in seventh in the points, and the other Mercedes at 208 points. So still a battle for bragging rights between the two Mercedes drivers. Sergio Perez managed to score a single point this race. He is in eighth place in the other Red Bull at 152 points. So I'm not even sure mathematically he can change his position at this point. I think he's locked into eighth, which, considering his teammate is the driver's champion, is honestly a little sad. Fernando Alonso, no points this weekend for him, but he is still holding on to ninth place in the driver's standings for Aston Martin at 62 points. And come to think of it, I think actually we now have 4 races in a row where Aston Martin has not scored any points in the weekend. So, I'm sure you're going to discuss it in the drivers or in the constructors standings. It's a good thing that they're pretty locked into their position because they've had a rough go of late. But as I said, Fernando Alonso holding on to ninth place at 62 points, and then 10th, which is still to play for. It's currently held by Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas at 35 points.
Yeah, that we've mentioned it many times. The 10th place in the drivers is something that is going to get, I don't know if it matters to any of them, but it's going to get spicy between those.
It'll matter. If I was a driver, even if it wasn't for money or anything, it would matter to me. So it definitely matters to them.
Yeah. Now, pride still does matter to these guys, absolutely, for sure. But where the money matters is the constructor standings. And it's gotten tight almost across the board. Only a couple positions are pretty locked in. Only really one that I can guarantee at this stage. But P1 is McLaren Mercedes. They maintain a lead in the constructors after this round. It is less. They are up to 608 points on the season. Second place, decreasing the lead down to 24 points, is Ferrari. They check in with 584 points. In third place, Max Verstappen is the driver's champion. Red Bull are probably not going to be constructors champions unless they get a turn of luck in these last 2 rounds. They are fairly adrift now of P1 in the constructors, but they can check in with 555 points for them. P4, this is the one position I can tell you with absolute certainty. This is where Mercedes will finish P4 in the constructors. Despite their great showing here, they are up to 425 points, but they cannot catch or be caught by anybody at this stage. P5, Aston Martin, as you mentioned, Cody, did not record a point. They remain on 86, but that is still 36 points to the good of P6, which is now inhabited by Haas, Ferrari, they check in with 50 points. So they have retaken P6 in the constructors after this round. P7 is the Alpine team, still riding high after the double podium in Brazil. Only a scant point between them and Haas. That fight is not over by a long shot. So they are on 49 points. And right on their heels is the V-Carb team, thanks to Yuki Tsunoda's good showing here. They check in now with 46 points. P9, can someone keep a car together? At least they leave Vegas with two cars that were together. Williams, Mercedes, my God, please no more crashes for them until the end of the season. I'm just seriously, just as a neutral fan, don't really care. I just want to see them get out of this season, man, because they've done enough work. I think they could have reconstructed. They could have built 5 different cars by now at this stage. They probably already have, but they check in. P9 is probably where they're going to finish. They will more than likely finish there. They check in with 17 points. And despite the one of the better efforts from Zhao Guanyu this weekend, it was not enough to get Kick Sauber off of the duck. They remain in P10 with 0 points. All right. Well, you've heard our takes on the Las Vegas GP. It is now time to open it up to your takes on what you saw this weekend. It's the fan email segment. We've got our normal contributors here in the dock as always. Cody, what do our contributors have to say?
All right. Our first fan email comes from Rachel Fleming. Thank you, Rachel. And she says, okay, Max Verstappen wins the title. Well done. Now to the important events. My man wins. George was brilliant all weekend and he dominated this race. Personally, I think he gets a lot of hate from the F1 community for no good reason. For me, George is my favorite driver on the grid. I always liked him ever since he was in that awful Williams in 2019. Perez watch. Q1 exit, so getting to 10th is okay. Going out in Q1 is still the main headline. And he got beat by Yuki, but that double overtake was very good. Great race by Nico Hülkenberg again, really showing off his talent. Shame he was never given the chance of a top drive. Gutted for Gasly after doing so well in quali. Alpine letting him down again. As for Ocon, that was a pure rookie mistake in the pit lane. Silly from him. Special shout out to the RB livery, though thought it looked really, really good. It reminded me of the 1997 Sauber, which is not a bad thing at all. And finally, Sauber watch. Joe did a brilliant race and was up to 9th at one point, but still finished 14th. Impressive from him this weekend. Such a shame my tweet didn't quite work. And then she goes on to say, I just did a massive disrespect of Joe. He was 13th. Yes, thank you, Rachel. Lots of good points there. One thing that we didn't really talk about earlier was the bit from Ocon there. So Ocon did have that moment where he went into the pits. He did not bail like Carlos Sainz did, but his team was also not out and ready. So at that time, Ocon was already in the pit lane. He had a choice to make. His options were to just drive through the pit lane and effectively give himself a drive-through penalty, or pull into the pit box and just wait for the team. I think he was kind of damned either way, but he ended up just passing straight through the pit lane and went back out on the track. Gosh, I don't really know where the order of events happened there, if the team called him in by mistake or if he misunderstood a call to the pits or what. I definitely feel like it's on the team that they weren't out there and ready. I mean, something wasn't communicated with the pit confirm or whatnot. I think it might have ended up a little better in Ocon's favor, and the commentators thought so as well, and that it would have been a little better if he had actually just stopped in the pit box. I think he would have probably lost less time pulling into the pit box and just wait for the team to get out there to do their stuff, then come down, pretty much for a drive-through penalty, and then have to come in again. But, I guess I don't know for sure. Either way, he wasn't in a position really to score points, so it was just kind of a little bit of a goofy situation.
Yeah, I mean, we did not get a chance to talk about it, and my apologies for not even noting it until I saw this. I went, oh, yeah, that happened too. It kind of was a situation where Alpine, because they are where they are in last year's constructors standings, were one of the first pit stalls on, the pit lane. So they did not have as much time as you would have if you were, say, Red Bull or Mercedes or even Aston Martin, where you could go down halfway down the pit lane, be hitting the pit confirm button on the steering wheel, which should light something within the garage that says that there's a car there, and alert the crew to, get up and get a set of tires ready because the guy's about to be here. Whatever the failure was, Ocon made the decision either because he had to or because there was literally nobody there. But he goes through the pit lane. It is basically like a self-assessed drive-through penalty, and then has to come around again, for the pit stop. So, just kind of a weird situation. Not something you generally see. We've seen sometimes where the crew isn't necessarily ready for the stop, but usually you would stop and just kind of let it happen because, it's probably less painful than what ended up happening there. But to Rachel's other points, I'm glad you're a George fan. George, in the world of F1 social media, I'm convinced that everybody gets hate thrown at them and everybody gets love thrown at them from other people. So it just kind of is what it is. And when you're looking for it, you're going to find it. You're either going to find the hate or you're going to find the likers of it. So it's just kind of the way that those things work, unfortunately, in the world of F1 social media, whether it's Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. It's all around. To your point on Perez watch, is probably a better race for him than what he's definitely been doing in the past. So he does get a point. You got to remember, this guy finished on the podium last year. So, at the same place in a track that should suit him, being a street track, being, less grippy conditions, as close to Baku as you could get without being Baku. And it just didn't work for him, especially in qualifying here. I'm with you about Nico Hülkenberg. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how that Audi situation comes in and what they do. Mattia Binotto is going to be there. They're going to have, obviously, Gabriel Bortoleto in the other seat. So Nico Hülkenberg is going to need the chance to be the mentor to that kid. And if he can set him up right and they can get the engineering side right, and there's nothing to say that Mattia Binotto is not a great engineer. He definitely is. If he can put together a team, maybe we get somewhere by the time he's done. So we'll have to see. If you are a fan of the resurgent Alpine, this was a very frustrating race, especially after the strong qualifying. And Gasly was doing the thing, and looked like he was going to be fine, and then the engine just dies out on him. And it's notable because we don't see it anymore. One of the things that I think you're going to see when you get to 2026 is you will see engine attrition come back because we haven't had so many years of just being able to work on reliability like we've had with these engines. These are by far the most reliable set of engines, whether they're normally aspirated or whether they're hybrids or whether they're fully electric. You don't see engine reliability like this, and you're probably never going to ever see it again. So to see that when something does fail, it's notable and it's significant. I did like the V-carb livery. I agree with you. I think it does harken back to a 97-esque Sauber, which was pretty cool. And I enjoyed the even the sparklies that was on there. I thought it looked good under the lights. We had our little thing with Sauber Watch. We were trying to manifest a Sauber 1-2, which I would have been all there for. Unfortunately, our combined tweet powers and our belief in the Kick Sauber team did not manifest, but it did get a good result. I think for them overall, 13th is definitely better than what they have been doing.
Mm-hmm. Last little point on the George hate. I agree with you that if you go looking for it, you're going to find both love and hate for any driver on the grid. I like George. I think he gets a lot of flack for maybe the perception that he's dropped some opportunities here and there, but all drivers have. I personally really like George. I think he's got a great personality. He is iconically British, which I think is a good thing. I think he leans into that now too. And I think a lot of people forget that he is up against Lewis Hamilton, one of the greatest of all time in the sport. And in the 3 seasons that they've driven with each other at the same team, we're looking like it's possible that George could beat him 2 out of 3. So that is, nothing to sneeze at. He is very talented, and I think if they can just get that Mercedes dialed in so it's more consistent, I think we have a good chance of seeing him win more races next year. All right. Thank you, Rachel, again for your email. Our next one comes from Dave Doherty. Thank you, Dave. And he says, "Hi, team Viva Las Vegas. I'm very happy and surprised that Mercedes had this weekend on top form. It was brilliant. And Verstappen is the champ of the world." Yes. I kind of like being called Team Viva Las Vegas. We will actually be Team Viva Las Vegas again in a couple of weeks' time here, which I'm very excited for. But yes, I am also very happy and very, very surprised that Mercedes was the cream of the crop this weekend. It seems to kind of come out of nowhere for them. These strange track conditions here, though, kind of made me think it was maybe possible because this was going to be one of the coldest races on the calendar, which is, in my opinion, kind of ironic because Las Vegas is in the desert, but it does get, I guess, cool there at night this time of year, and that just played into the Mercedes form, as you were talking about, the stupid downforce when we were talking a little bit ago, that just plays into what their car has. And it was very good to see. Since their car has not been in very good form this year, when they do get these moments, they're very excited and ecstatic. George is only 3 official wins to his name at this point. I really feel like it should be 4. But every time he wins, he is elated and very excited, and it's great to hear that over the radio. It was great to see Lewis Hamilton get that win at Great Britain earlier this year. So yes, I'm happy to see them win, which is really funny because a few years ago I wouldn't have been happy to see Mercedes win. I would have been bored to tears and been like, oh yeah, another one to extend Lewis's record. Goodie. But no, this time around, it is good to see.
Yeah, and I suddenly became. Zach Brown even mentioned it in one of the interviews during the race, where he's like, "I'm going to suddenly become a Mercedes fan and go Lewis." And I was like, "Yes, indeed." Once he got past both Lando and Oscar, I said, "Go get the Ferraris, please. Go get the Ferraris." And Lewis, to his credit, managed to pull it off. So limited, thank God. Like I said before, thank God for that, because otherwise. If Ferrari had pulled off a 1-2 here with a 6th and 7th, the math didn't look all that great. But we go from here to Qatar. I've even heard Sainz on a couple interviews said that they don't think they're going to be as good in Qatar as they certainly were here. So we'll have to see. Again, here's the thing. These cars are in such this narrow working window. And if you're a Mercedes fan, and I know Dave definitely is a big Mercedes guy, the thing that you take from a performance like this, it's probably not sustainable this season, but they're not that far off. They're really, truly not that far off. It's just a couple things. You just got to figure out how to get the window a little bit more open so that you can compete throughout the course of the season, because once you're there, you guys, they haven't forgotten how to execute. So they are still one of the best run organizations up and down the paddock. And when you give those guys a sniff, look what they did. So, harbinger possibly of things to come. We'll have to see. Going to be a big deal. The build between the end of this season and next year is, significant. That's why you still see people bringing upgrades in the last race of the season, because they're still trying to get this stuff all lined up for next year, because it's such a big change coming for 2026.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you again, Dave, for your email. Our last one comes in from the Formula. Thank you, Mr. Formula. And he says, WTF, Mercedes, or if we're going to be Charles Leclerc, what the fuck, Mercedes? What an inconsistent car, but it sure showed its potential this weekend. Also, color me stupid. After watching F1 for years, I just this weekend realized that they show a faint graphic in the bottom right corner showing what turn each individual camera cut is covering. Has this always been the case? And was I just, or yes, I'm sorry, has this always been the case and was I just oblivious? Honestly, I don't think you are that oblivious, because until reading this, I did not realize that either. So now I've got something new to look for on the broadcast. That's actually really cool. And it kind of probably helps to follow where things are going on. No, I'm not oblivious at all, or either that or we're both oblivious.
So this started back slightly after the Liberty made the acquisition, and even before they like changed the logo and they did all kind of that stuff. They put in some subtle things. I don't know. I can't even remember the year. I want to say it was like 13 or 14, but there was a year at COTA where instead of what they did was they put little pylons at each of the turns that would say turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5. And one, nobody liked shipping them all over the world. And two, they could easily get destroyed if somebody went off. So that lasted a couple of races, and they tried it out. They decided ultimately not to do it. So then they went to the one in the graphic. When they redid the graphics, when Liberty came in and kind of re-established the graphics away from the old F1 logo, and they made the logo with kind of the, your that black tree that you see in the corner, they would identify the turns. They don't do it all the time. But it does come up at different points throughout practices, especially if they're on a run with a car, you'll see it pop up. If they're trying to stay with something throughout a battle, throughout the course of the lap, you'll see it come up as well to try to tell you where it is. And it was kind of an evolution of it. It started as a physical sign, and then they went virtual and they just made it a graphic. So it's been around, I think, since around 2013 or 2014 in some fashion. I know under the regime, they didn't do any of it. The old regime did none of that. So what they've never done is they've never like changed the numbers into like a corner name or something like that, because the same corner could be named something different depending on what country is doing the broadcasting.
The old regime would probably curled up their nose and said, if you were an F1 fan, you would know it.
Exactly.
No, I for one think it's a good graphic, and we'll be looking out for it in the future.
Yeah, well, no, and it's good to call that kind of stuff out, because I mean it's subtle, and that's what they were trying to do with it. I know too, was they were trying to make it so that it would inform but not dominate. They were not trying to take anything away. So it's a fine line when you're trying to bring new fans in, and this is obviously Liberty's big push to try to bring as many new fans is this race and this weekend. So I'm not surprised that that's there, and it's just another way to try to explain it. Now, I was also glad that we didn't get yet another explanation of the DRS. So that, to me, as an experienced fan, is a good thing.
Yes. All right. Thank you guys very much for your emails. We always look forward to them. We enjoy the dialogue with you guys.
Yep. Yes. Totally echo that statement as well. Thank you so much for contributing. Good thoughts here across the board, as always. We come to expect it, and we love it. All right. So we will move into our awards, and we shall start with the rubbish. Cody, what goes in the bin for you this weekend?
I'm going to keep driving this point home until he is not officially in the seat. Out of the 8 drivers that drive for teams that have won races this season, at Red Bull, Max is the driver's champion, and Sergio Perez is last out of those 8 drivers. I think that's enough said. I think Perez used to have it. I think he was a really good driver. I think he is still a decent driver. We saw a flash of it this weekend with that amazing double overtake. That was really cool stuff. But I don't think he's got it for the Red Bull team now. I think it's time to give that seat to someone else and see what they can do with it.
Fair enough point. Yeah, and we'll watch and see if anything happens. Nothing has happened yet, and if it hadn't happened yet, he's going to make it to the end of the season, because they're just going to run out of races. But yeah, it's definitely something to watch for sure in the off season. My rubbish, I didn't really have a whole lot that kind of annoyed me, but I think the timing of this 11th team, and it's just part of me is very happy, obviously, that we're going to get there. Andretti staff, all of those things. We're going to see a U.S.-based team. Cadillac GM is a big deal. You're going to have GM going at Ford, going at Ferrari, going at all these manufacturers. So all that, I think, is very good. It just kind of sucks that this is kind of how we had to get here. And it's just the whole process of how we ended up here just strikes me as petty. Everybody was taking backhanded slaps at each other throughout the course of it, whether it was Michael Andretti being overly brash or Greg Maffei famously saying, "Not in my lifetime are you ever going to make it to the F1 grid." It just throws all of the easy tropes that the sport is trying to avoid right out in front of everybody to take advantage of. And, I'm a big fan of this sport. That's why I'm sitting here talking about it, because I love it. And I get up at strange, weird hours and stay up at crazy hours to watch this stuff. And I want it to do well. And it just, when people are being stupid for petty reasons, it just annoyed me. And, I'm glad that this is the end of the saga. At least if nothing else, the saga will finally come to an end. We'll get our 11th team, and I'll be happy for that. But in the minute, it's just the process sucked. But let's hope we do better. All right, so we will move to analysis paralysis. For a minute, I had a hard time with this one. I may change this on the fly, but Cody, I'll let you go first. What you got?
All right, so I had put down just Ferrari for this. After discussing it, I'm now going to extend that to Ferrari and Alpine for pit lane weirdness. This race, we had not one but two teams that were not ready for their drivers when they were coming into the pits, and all I could think of was, "You're a pit crew. It's what you do. Why are you not ready? You literally only have to be ready, twice, maybe three times, for most Grand Prix. Sometimes once if you're lucky." And yeah, the fact that we saw two pit crews that were not ready for their drivers was very weird. Definitely some balls dropped there on both teams' parts. So they're going to take my analysis paralysis award.
Yeah, definitely fair enough. So I started this out by saying the Alonso move to start with soft tires. I got it, but it clearly didn't work. And I think he got off of those tires after like 4 laps or something like that. So it ended up being a very, very cringy moment. Now, to Alonso's credit, his other stints were obviously a lot better, and he came home P11, which is just outside the point. So obviously it didn't super hinder him. But what could have been, had they just started him on the medium along with everybody else, and if he pits and he manages to do what he does, being the great driver that he is, maybe Aston score a point. So it kind of felt like a bit of an own goal there. The other one that I was going to give on the fly is to all the pit stop stuff. I agree with you, Cody. That's just weird. I mean, there's a pit confirm button that most drivers are hitting as they're coming around a corner to alert these guys. And if it's set up right, a big klaxon alarm almost goes off that says, "Hey, somebody's coming down the pit lane." And to see it with signs, at least they aborted it. But to see the Ocon one where you look off to the left, there's nobody there. Yeah, it's just something you just don't see. So yeah, that is kind of the definition of analysis paralysis, because somebody didn't analyze and then they all got paralyzed. All right, so we will move into our dark horse of the day. I'll go first with this one, and I've got a couple reasons I want to give this one out. One, for Haas for striking back in this constructor battle, because I thought they've been doing well, and 2, for Nico Hülkenberg for proving me right when we talk about predictions. So Haas and Hülkenberg get my award for dark horse for doing what they had to do to retake P6 in the constructors. Is that battle done? Hell no. It's going to go all the way to the last turn of the wheel, I think, in Abu Dhabi before we're going to find out who takes that P6 in the constructors. But good going, Haas. Nice way to fight back after the shocker of Brazil.
Nothing. All right, my dark horse award, I was going to give it to Mercedes for getting the 1-2 finish out of nowhere, but after thinking about it, they are still Mercedes, so I'm not sure they're a dark enough horse for the dark horse award. So I'm actually going to give this one to Pierre Gasly for his wild qualifying performance, where he managed to get into P3 in an Alpine that we, at the beginning of the season, were constantly teasing for being absolutely awful back of the grid. And he made it happen. So there's got to be something in the water where Gasly lives or something right now, because these last couple of race weekends he's really shown some very strong pace.
And it might just be that Pierre Gasly's got some real good talent, and he just has been having some crappy cars the last couple of years. So we'll that's what I hope it is. I really do hope so, because I remember when he won that freak race in Monza a few years ago, you thought that maybe this was the start of something really good for that guy. And he just couldn't get himself in elite drive, trying to get back to, that Red Bull second seat. It was clear that Helmut Marko was just not going to have it. So where he goes, and if he can build something with this group, he's obviously their number one moving forward. So he's got to have a rookie teammate next year. And he's going to have the opportunity to try to build that team around him, which is, I think, very important. So well done to Pierre Gasly for his recent form, despite not converting it in the race. But you can't do anything about that when your engine decides to say no more. All right. So we'll move into our driver of the day. I think we have some consensus here. I'll go first with this one. George Russell, man, from the first practice to the end of the weekend, just tremendous in control all weekend long. That Mercedes they found the window. Whatever the window was, they certainly found it. They stayed within it. They never really faded. The field got close to him in some of the practices, but at the end of the day, when George decided to push, the car reacted, and he did a great job, I thought, throughout the course of the not only securing the win, but doing it pretty drama-free.
Yes, I agree completely. For me, Max Verstappen is the driver of the season, and he is now officially driver of the season, and that makes me very happy. But as far as this one race day, Max Verstappen only did what he needed to do to clinch the title. He played it pretty safe, brought it home to a 5th place. So I don't think you can argue that the driver of the day here was George Russell. Driver of the weekend really seemed to be in control through all sessions, and managed the race very, very well. As I said earlier, I don't even think when Lewis was catching him that it was really going to turn into a battle. I think he was just holding back for when he needed it. So, yep, George Russell, driver of the day.
Yep, agreement there. And I also put in my thing for Max for winning the championship, doing what he needed to do. I actually thought just the course of this weekend was one of his more talent-filled weekends. Everybody's going to look at Brazil and they're going to, wow at what he did in the wet. And you should admire and wow at that. But here was a weekend that didn't look like it was going right. FP2, he was in 17th place, no pace on the medium tires, no race pace in the long runs. And then they got it together in FP3 and in qualifying to get it up there, and they kept it there, which is not an easy feat. So I think on a track that, was very challenging for a lot of people, I thought Max did extremely well under some harder conditions too, and did what he needed to do to win the drivers this weekend. So good on you for that. So I tip my cap to Max Verstappen this season. I don't know that I ever said it was really a fight for the drivers, but we kind of got where we got. But he did the job for sure in the early part of the season, and then when the pressure kind of ramped up, he showed true in Brazil and here. All right. So we will now have to talk a little bit about predictions, which of course went right out the window when Mercedes decided to show up. So yeah, there goes our podium, gone. The only things we got were the lap times and the prop bet. The prop bet saves us. So Cody, you get 2 points. You did get the qualifying lap time. Your qualifying lap time was actually very, very respectable, only a tenth or two off the actual with the one. I think you were 132, low 132, and that was pretty close to what it was. You had a 132.1, and I think the actual pole time was a 132.3. So that's only 0.2 difference.
Yeah.
So that's pretty.
I'll take it.
Damn respectable right there. But you got the other point for saying yes to the prop bet. Somebody from Team USA scored a point, but you did not get who scored that point. I did. So I got 3 points. I got the overall fastest lap time thanks to the fastest lap of the day that was actually set at the end by Lando Norris because he was kind of on his own. Did throw on the set of softs, did go out and get that extra point, so that could come back and be significant for McLaren there. I get a point for saying yes, Team USA will score a point, and I got the prop bet driver because I said Nico Hulkenberg was going to be the highest Team USA scorer, and that's what basically does it for me. So I take it 3-2 on the weekend. I promise for Abu Dhabi, I'm going to have where we are going into it, so we know. I'm going to tally all of the weekends. I got to go through all of these and tally them up and see where we're at.
I think it's actually pretty close at this point.
Yeah, I mean, my wins are there. They're not huge points scoring wins, but a win is a win is a win is a win, I guess. So there we go. All right. So as we wrap up, we go from the cold desert of Las Vegas to a very warm desert of Qatar. We had to move this race back on the calendar. It used to be in mid-October. We're now doing it at the end of November because it was so damned hot last year. We had mandatory tire pit stops last time out. Let's hope for none of the above. Let's hope we have a normal service resumed race on tap in Qatar on a track that looks generally pretty suited to MotoGP bikes, but we're going to race F1 cars around here. But Cody, any thoughts as we go from the cold desert to the warm desert?
Yeah, last year's race was a bit of a doozy with how hot it was, to the point of maybe even getting a little bit dangerous for the drivers. Definitely too hard on the tires with the mandatory stops, which I thought was made for a pretty boring race because you knew when everyone was going to be pitting. So I'm hoping we don't have to do that again this year. I'm hoping that pushing it back about a month and a half is enough to help alleviate the temperatures. I think probably because of where Qatar is in the world, I'm not sure it's ever actually like not hot in Qatar, but hopefully it's a little less hot.
Yeah, fully agree with you there. But as we ramp up for that weekend, we will be back on later on this week for a Qatari GP preview. We do have a little thing called a holiday on Thursday, so we'll have to see when we actually can push that out. But we're going to do our best to try to do that to get you ramped and ready to go. This constructors fight across the board is anywhere but finished. There are lots of stories and lots of things to be settled out in both the drivers and the constructors, despite the fact that Max Verstappen has wrapped up the Drivers' Championship. So we're going to be here to cover all of it. And we got 2 races to go. I think they're going to be a hell of a lot of fun, and they're going to be interesting watches. So we'll be here all the way for it. So for Cody, it's been Andy. Enjoy your holiday week in the U.S. if you are, and if you're not, get ready for our Qatari preview and a Qatari race next weekend. So may all your laps be fast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Outlap F1 podcast. If you like what you heard, click that subscribe button and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. If you want to connect with us outside of the show, check out our website at www.outlapf1.com. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at OutlapF1 Podcast, or email us at chatnow@outlapf1.com. As always, thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you on the next one.